task of providing training camps and housing got underway. Dewalt met the challenge by manufacturing and developing new machines to do the job of mass production on a scale never before attempted. A contract for 1,500 buildings in the Fort Lewis and Camp Murray districts was awarded the Sound Kiewit Company. Remembering the slow and tedious crude table and hand sawing methods of 1917, the Dewalt district engineer, Mr. A.I. Legride, designed and recommended the gang cutting conveyor type of saw setup. 21 7 1/2 horsepower Dewalts were selected to handle all the cutting operations on 30 million board feet of lumber, making possible new records of pre-cutting and fabricating lumber used in these training and housing quarters. Antiquated design of the common table type of saw consumes much time that should be producing pre-cut material. Insufficient power that limits the material worked and greatly retards production. Many unproductive minutes are taken to change to different operations that are so easily and quickly made on the Dewalt. A simple movement of the finder latch key locates the saw from straight crosscut to ripping position right or left hand in a few seconds. This is one of the many features that has helped to gain superior performance and high prestige for purchasers of Dewalt saws. This rugged machine piles up savings, big savings that quickly pay for the cost of the equipment plus an extra profit in shortening time of production. In the Fort Lewis region at Camp Murray, 2 parallel rows of conveyors with 21 saws interspaced in their 800-foot length were set up. Ample space between the rows accommodated double-track railroad spurs and also allowed crawler cranes to swing lumber direct from the cars to the saws or store it in piles beside the roller conveyors. The cranes moved the entire length of the conveyors when necessary. If the lot was to be cut immediately, it was placed alongside the conveyor. Because of the efficient and practical design of this Dewalt production line, new production records followed. 21 saws in this line kept 2,100 carpenters busy driving nails. In this huge Army project, the many thousands of studding required in barracks and other construction was a simple matter for the cut-up plant. Rolling in groups of 5 to 8 on the conveyors to the Dewalt saws, gang cutting made possible a record of 12,000 pieces in 8 hours on one machine. This record became a reality not only by steady supply of material to the saws, but equally efficient means of keeping the cut studding rolling away from the saw. The rugged design and easy operation of the Dewalt makes unmatched speed in the production of pre-cut material. Similar to the studding operation, gang sawing of headers also exceeded expectations. Hour after hour, cut after cut, each as accurate as the first. One machine made 16,500 headers in a total of 8 hours. Another gang operation was the cutting of 2x4 fire stops. Being a simple process, the saws produced a tremendous volume. While the lumber moved steadily along the conveyors, men and machines worked in perfect unison. Here was precision action. Every pull of the saw produced its quota of pre-cut material. Stroke after stroke, the operation seemed almost automatic. Every hour confirmed production figures that many refused to believe. Over 16,000 pieces of bridging came from one saw during a 7 1/2 hour period. No matter whether the material is 1x4 or 2x3, the angle cut is made smooth and accurate. Uniform perfection of the angle cut adds speed to the work and results in better construction. 6x6 timbers were no obstacle to the powerful Dewalt saw. The extraordinary power concentrated in the compact dust-sealed steel case of the Dewalt-built direct drive motor gives dependable performance and maximum service under motor-killing conditions. Pre-cutting over 4,000 stair jacks on the Fort Lewis project was no complicated cutting problem for the versatile Dewalt saw. Each set of 3 2x12 jacks were cut at one time. Lift stops set at proper distance permitted the rapid cut of each riser. Rolling on to the second machine, the tread was cut in the same way. The large 22-inch saw works as easily at this extreme bevel angle as if it were making a vertical crosscut. When the 3 matched jacks were placed in position, no time was lost in misfitting risers or treads. Many thousands of 2x6 and 2x8 rafters were required. The stock was placed on the conveyor 6 to 8 at once, with the crown in proper position. Approaching the saw, the square or bottom end butted against a hinge stop. A foot-operated clamp held each rafter solidly in place, while the bevel saw made the top plumb cut. The foot clamp released and hinge stop raised, the material moved to the next machine. The arbor of this machine was fitted with a special rafter notching head, making the plate or heel cut on all of the stock at one sweep. A manually operated chain feed permitted positive steady control of the cutting tool. The actual time required to notch 8 rafters was only 4 seconds. Never before had anyone attempted to gang cut rafter stock of this amount and size. Another record of 90,000 board feet in 8 hours came from these 2 machines. Thousands of the rafters required a purlin cut in addition to the heel cut. A second stop set a proper distance accomplished this. The rafters made in this way proved far superior to the hand-cut type. Special roller push-offs kept the conveyors clear. At this point, they were stacked for the lumber carriers. 160 carloads of siding were needed for this job. Conveyors carried the bundles direct from the boxcar to the saws. Butting against a stop, the bundles were even for the first squaring cut. After squaring this end, the bundle was advanced to the proper stop and cut to exact length, thus squaring both ends and cutting to 24 inches on centers. Flooring was handled similar to the siding. Rolling down the conveyors from the car, the bundles were squared and sawed in the same way. Every bundle of flooring was cut in the most practical length according to the requirements of the job. The various stops were set at the correct distance for establishing the desired centers for the cuts. Here again the cut-up plants proved their well-engineered design, while the saws swung through the bundles with clock-like precision. As many as 5 miter or bevel cuts were necessary to provide the various surfaces of a small piece. The contractor realized the fact that sharp and well-kept saw blades was a prime requisite in these cut-up plants. An expert filer, Mr. Dick Johnson, was the man who kept these saws properly set, hammered, gummed, and filed. Latest types of filing equipment in his hands kept the saws in perfect condition, ready for instant use. In the construction area, each stage of erection was handled by its own particular crew. When the foundation and subfloor were ready, framing crews followed. One crew specialized in the erection of the 4 outside walls. Complete gable end sections were raised at one time. The 63-man barracks were designed 2 stories in height, 30 feet wide, and 80 feet long. Each framing crew performed its specific work on an average of 4 of these barracks every 8 hours. interesting feature of the framing was the use of 3 templates for laying out all the wall sections. Properly located notches provided a place for all studding and other framing material. It was raised in one complete section. Almost in a matter of minutes, a large structure has arisen before our very eyes. After the frames were in place, the rafter crew followed. The precision cut material fits perfectly, each heel cut going snugly into place. Roof sheeting of veneer are quickly nailed in position, and the building is now ready for the roofing crew. 1,500 buildings, barracks, mess halls, and warehouses have sprung up in record time in the Fort Lewis area. Similar cut-up plants were installed in Bremerton, Washington, to pre-cut the material for many hundreds of more permanent dwelling units to house Navy Yard workmen and their families. The Navy's program of construction of supply depots, training bases with their varied types of housing, personnel, and training quarters has topped all records in speed. Millions of feet of fir and pine furnished a steady supply for the pre-cutting and fabricating the many kinds of buildings erected at Farragut Naval Training Base. At Lake Ponderay, Idaho, over 10 million feet of lumber made up the available stock kept on hand in the storage yard, while over 100 million feet were used in building the base. Brought in by railroad, the lumber was distributed to the various areas of the yard by motor truck. 35 Dewalt saws made up the cutting equipment of this project, over 3,000 feet in length. This roller conveyor made up the longest assembly line yet attained, and was far more efficient than ordinary wooden plank extension tables so frequently used. The versatility of the Dewalt saw makes new developments in mass production inevitable. Many thousand surveyor and hub stakes used in rapid laying out of areas, streets, and buildings ordinarily would create no small problem. Turning out these stakes by the hundreds with the typical swing action of the saws was a natural. As the stakes were brought down on the conveyor to the tilted saw, it swung through them to form the first cut, or half the pointed end. The first cut having been made, the bundle of stakes was then returned in a reversed position for the opposite cut to form the point. After the final cut, the stakes came from the saw with sharp, uniform points. Now tied in bundles, they were neatly piled for transportation to the job when needed. Another development of stake production was carried out in producing 2x2 stakes. The use of a jig holding as many as 29 stakes at one time and a reversing conveyor made the rapid 4-sided cuts at record speed. As the jig moved through the stationary tilted saw, the first cut was neatly sliced off. Then the stakes were placed upon a return conveyor ready for the second cut. The second trip through the saw sliced off another side, and again the return trip made in the same manner. The third cut was accomplished in exactly the same way, the stakes being turned each time for their particular cut. As the stakes move through the saw for the fourth and final cut, the precision point of the clean 4-way cut is apparent. No hand-sharpened stake can match the smooth, uniform cut of the saw. 1,100 stakes were finished every 10 minutes on one saw. A specially designed curved facing, termed a fascia board, was applied to the building roofs at the drip edge. The round surface provided a smooth base for the roofing turned at this point, eliminating cracks and prospect of leaks. A 2x8 plank made up this fascia board, the first operation being a relief cut of the surface to be treated. The common 45-degree bevel rip tilt of the saw provided this cut to remove excess material. facilitating the final cut accomplished by a special tool consisting of a series of curved knives applied to the arbor of the saw. Quick application of these special tools is one of the outstanding features of the Dewalt, making the unit ready for different operations in minimum time. The first diagonal cut of the fascia board now passed through the curved cutting tool. 500,000 lineal feet of these boards were run through the saw in a minimum of time. Each cut came out smooth and true, perfectly shaped for the job. New ideas that made speedier handling of 1x4 flooring were worked out at the Farragut Training Base job. These new methods contributed to more accurate and faster squaring of the bundles of flooring as they came from the railroad car. A new system of stops, quickly operated by the man handling the saw, squared both ends of the bundles with minimum time and waste. In a timed period of regular production, 3,240 board feet of random length 1x4 flooring were squared in exactly 16 minutes on one saw. Some 10 million feet totaled the entire amount of the job treated in this way. In the planing mill, 7 Dewalt saws were constantly busy fabricating special finished lumber for shelving, window frames, cabinets, and so on. Day-doing shelving supports made up one of the many types of cabinet work accomplished in the mill. Cross-day-doing the 3/4-inch grooves of the shelf supports was easy work for these powerful Dewalts. The quick shift to ripping position provided an immediate setup for plowing of the material. Moving along the line of the 7 saws in the planing mill gave one a fine cross-section of the many types of finish cutting. Each saw of the line had its own crew. Each man of the crew had his own particular part of the work, either feeding material, operating the saw, or removing the finished material. Many types of angle and shortcuts were made in small dimension pieces. Shelving boards, angle braces, and odd-shaped pieces constantly rolled away from the many machines. Making these various cuts in the fastest time was only possible through the Dewalt design. The setup of the entire mill added greatly to the fast production of the finished material needed. More and heavier operations continue to be accomplished as each successive project is completed. On the Farragut project, the practice of squaring 4 2x14-inch planks 20 feet long at one time was a common sight. The heavy-duty 7.5 horsepower Dewalt saw performed the job with ease. Eight-by-8 timbers made up a large percentage of the heavy-duty sawing. Huge piles were kept in constant readiness for the filling of the pre-cut orders. Many heavier duties were demanded of the saws than heretofore experienced. The 24-inch saw was called upon to make cuts of many types of timbers, some angled, some straight cut-off, and others at partial cut-offs and triangular in shape. The efficiency in handling these heavy timbers demonstrates what produced the material in record time. Rolling down the conveyor almost of their own weight, each timber pauses only long enough at the saw for the particular cut to be made. Moving away from the saw, the heavy timbers were handled by special conveyors that turned them on their way to the men who made them ready for the carrier pickups. One of the heavy timber cuts was an angular piece with triangular ends, called a corbel block. Rapid production of these blocks was accomplished by the turning of the timber at the saw as each successive cut was made, thereby making the triangular cut on each block with the saw in one position. Approximately 20,000 of these blocks supported beams, beam ends, sills, plates, and other material when placed upon columns or similar supports. Another startling heavy-duty operation was the day-doing of 21-inch long tenons to form lap joints of various timbers, plates, or other material. This job stood out as one of the heaviest the saws performed. Biting through the heavy timbers, the powerful dado head ate away the rugged lumber as though it were soft as butter. Here was another demonstration of the reserve power of the Dewalt saw. Huge drill halls, 150 feet in width and 600 feet in length, with no central obstructing columns or supports, provide enclosed drill areas for inclement weather. Careful planning and efficient engineering under the supervision of Commander Clark, United States Naval officer in charge, and with the help of Dewalt saws in new capacities, resulted in the completion of the Farragut Naval Training Base on schedule. Seattle's Lake Washington Floating Concrete Bridge is the largest in the world. Thousands of feet of form lumber for the tunnels, approaches, and pontoons were cut for the 7 contractors by 7 Dewalt saws. New shipyard construction in the Puget Sound area accompanies America's tremendous wartime activity. The great new Seattle-Tacoma shipyards and the famous Todd dry docks are centers of the new shipping and repairs. Here, too, in the building of the new ways and buildings, as well as the new shipping construction, Dewalt is playing its part. Grand Coulee, the greatest hydroelectric and reclamation project ever attempted by man, dams the mighty Columbia, America's second largest river. Dewalt saws worked up the millions of board feet of form lumber used in this mammoth undertaking, most of the time operating 3 shifts per day. Here in the Pacific Northwest is the home of Boeing. The great Boeing clippers wing their way around the world. And the Flying Fortress, the world's deadliest bomber, also is made here. In this great plant, Dewalt equipment is doing its share night and day. From all these activities comes the story of Dewalt saws. The machine as up to date as tomorrow. The flexible equipment that developed and met the demands of modern mass production, helping in the struggle to speed the day of a free world. When that day arrives, and our men of the service return to their homes and daily lives, Dewalt saws, too, will return to peacetime production. From the records of their performance, the world will know that here was a machine that, in its humble way but in no small measure, had helped in final victory.